Is Lost Ark dying? That is the burning question on everybody's minds right now. In this video, we'll discuss why it may or may not be happening. So stick around and enjoy the show, and I'll see you on the other side.
This stinks! I hate it this way.
What's wrong with it?
Less cheese. Less macaroni. More cheese. Too much macaroni. Ooh, perfect. I hate macaroni and cheese.
So I'm sure you've seen plenty of people talking about some of the things that are displeasing for them when it comes to Lost Ark, whether it be from something in the in-game system, or whether it be from about the company, or whether it be a combination thereof. There's been a lot of doom and gloom around the community, and I think a lot of it is unwarranted, to be frank. And here's why. One of the things that we see happen frequently is that large members of any community will either make videos or make content based around their opinion about a game. What we see is usually in the first 2 weeks or so, maybe even a month, the honeymoon phase for a game. The players will be excited. They'll post content about it and they will be super excited. It's an amazing game. Everything's going wonderfully. Then maybe a month or so afterwards, when the new honeymoon phase is worn off, players start in on the negativity. And I think that is at the spot where we are now. So what negativity are we talking about? Whether it comes from the issues with whaling, whether it comes from content being released too fast, whether it comes from the honing system, there is a lot of pain points for different parts of the community, all of which people contribute to the game dying. And I do not think that the game is dying. I think it is a very normal experience that the population of an MMO will drop upon its release, and then shortly thereafter the player base will become smaller and smaller. And you can see that in almost every MMO. Players try out the game, some stay, some don't, some leave. We also have to keep in mind as well that there are many bots that have been banned, and those player numbers include bots, so we have to keep that in mind as well. But the reason I wanted to make this video is around the negativity that seems to be infectious.
Saying that Lost Ark is like going down, it's just like where are you getting this from? Like, are you watching YouTubers who like, the game is amazing, it's incredible, the best game ever for like the first 2 weeks, and then as soon as that like 2 week, 3 week, 4 week mark hits, they're like, the problems that are killing this game, the ultimate downfall of this game. And the reason why they're doing that is just because that's the flow of how to get the most views out of your content. Say good things in the beginning, and then start to make negative content like as soon as the launch hype fades a little bit, you immediately start shitting on the game.
I feel as though when popular content creators voice their opinions about how frustrated they are with the game, they are doing so not necessarily because that is their honest opinion, and it might be, but because they know it generates views, right? In human psychology, we know that negative things tend to stick around in our brains a lot more than the positive things. Hence why I believe that negative content about a game gets greater numbers of views than positive content. When everybody's first playing the game, like we talked about earlier, it's all positive content, but as soon as any little bump or speed bump comes along, the players then seem to be dissatisfied quite easily. One of the things that's difficult to do is understand whether their opinions are warranted or not. So instead of playing a he said, she said game, why don't we look at some of the facts and look at what we're actually dealing with here, and maybe we can all come to a better consensus about what's actually happening, as opposed to basing our opinions off of just those who make content about the game, myself included. I think it's very important to hear contrary opinions. I think it's very important to hear opinions that differ from your own. Being able to hear somebody else's point of view and understand what they are thinking and what gets them to think that way can help you understand what their issues and or problems might be about any one given topic. This doesn't just apply to Lost Ark, but to all things in general. I think it's important to hear contrary opinions, and I'm here to give you some. One of the major things that we're hearing right now too is that there's not enough content, which is interesting because not but 2 weeks ago, Argus came out. I seem to remember that everybody was quite vocal and upset about the game having too much content too quickly. But now we seem to be in a state where there's not enough content. So how can we have both? The answer is you can. There is not either too little content or too much content, but rather a sense of how players feel about it, whether they're in the content or not, and have experienced it via a streamer or a content creator, as opposed to experiencing it themselves. One of the things that we saw was that when Argus came out, there was only 1% of the player base above 1300. 1% is quite small. But what we see now, as of checking today, there are 3.4% of players in tier 3 above 1300. What does that tell us? That tells us that the catch-up mechanics that they instituted for us are working. There has been a tripling of players getting into tier 3 now, and still we seem to have people complaining that there isn't enough content to do. One thing that I'd also like to point out too is that Argus being released a month after the game came out, again, was expressed as being too soon. But one thing that we forget is that even if a game company is releasing content, say a month out, that not a lot of players are able to do, even just 1% of the players are able to do, that is too soon. But I think it's actually to the contrary. I think that they released it that soon because they did have a roadmap of getting content out to us quickly to avoid what is happening now, which is what players are saying is there is too little content. So games like WoW, for example, will release Mythic difficulty, the hardest difficulty, and there are only a small handful of players, maybe 100 players around the world, maybe 200 players at most, who are able to push that content and complete it. Again, that is a 1% of the population that can do that content upon its release. But the game company does not stop releasing the content because players aren't there yet. Players will get there when they get there, and it's not as if content is being removed from the game, only added to the game. So I think that with that being said, it's important to realize that we are on a fast track, that they are trying to catch us up as quickly as possible to the Korean version. And we hear that we don't have a lot of systems that they have in Korea, that we're missing out some of the more fun content that they do have over in Korea. How is it that we're able to, in such a short amount of time, go from saying it's too quick, there's not enough people doing Argus, to it's too slow, there's a lack of content? And I think the reason that this opinion has kind of been generated is actually because of, again, the popularity of specific streamers getting to that milestone or those milestones in a much faster amount of time than the average player can. What do I mean by this? Well, everybody knows that you are able to pay real money to be able to progress your character.
Well, every $900 was, as of yesterday, was 300,000 gold, I think.
There's nothing wrong with that. If that is how you choose to play the game, that is 100% your prerogative, and I think there's nothing wrong with it. But keep in mind that upon doing that, upon paying for completion, you are going to experience the content at a much more rapid rate than somebody who is free to play grinding out the content. You skip days or even weeks of content by expediting it via gold and real money. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing that. That is totally fine for players who want to play. But then we reach into this issue where players will have reached the content, the top level of the content, and then start saying that there is not enough to do. Well, the reason that they don't have as much to do is because the way that the game is designed is to accommodate the most amount of players, meaning the general population. That being said, is they know that the vast majority of the population will not be able to speed through the content at which some players do. Meaning there is a lifespan to the content, and the lifespan is not over once a handful of people reach the end game and reach the completion of the content that is out currently. We still have a large majority of the player base, 96.4% in fact, that have yet to get here. So there's still plenty of content to be done. It is just that by their choices of playing the game with real money, it has expedited their progress, and so that has left them feeling like there's not enough to do. One of the things that we see happening frequently with this, unfortunately, is that players will let other players' opinions or their favorite streamers' opinions or YouTubers' opinions, etc., color their own opinion. Meaning that if they are experiencing content via their favorite streamer, that they feel as if though they have experienced that content as well, and that's a good thing. It's good to have a sense of community that players can enjoy the game with. But what quickly happens, as we see here, is that people start to express negative opinions, and even players who have not yet experienced that content come to hold the same opinion of the negative comments expressed or negative opinions expressed by whoever it may be. Unfortunately, that's just human nature. We want to be part of a group. We want to be part of a team. We are very tribal as humans, and it's as if believing or espousing a certain narrative that your favorite person or your favorite streamer or your favorite whatever holds will make you part of their team. And I'm here to tell you that it is totally fine to be part of any team that you want to be a part of, but I think you should stand on your own 2 feet and think for yourself. One of the things we see is with FOMO is that it's not necessarily just the content that they're missing out on in the game, that it can happen in reverse, that their fear of playing a dead game or their fear of the game dying will actually keep them from playing, because players don't want to invest time into a game that is going to die. It is the sunken cost fallacy. So that creates quite a bit of negativity, probably getting people who are on the fence to swing one way or another, whether they quit or continue to play the game. Now, before I get into my own personal opinion on the game, I wanted to also remind everybody of something. Amazon and Smilegate have a tremendous amount of pressure being put on them, obviously, by the community. And it is a very, very hard balancing act. I don't think any game should not be subject to criticism. I think wherever there is criticism, if it is warranted, it is important to express. My fear, though, is that we are giving both Amazon and Smilegate unrealistic expectations for what the players want. For example, saying there's too much content and it's too fast, and now that there's too little content and that it's too slow. What is Amazon or Smilegate supposed to do in this situation? It is a no-win situation for them, because players have expressed both opinions, and now they are contrary opinions, in fact. And so what does a company do going forward? Do they continue to release content quickly and then risk the backlash of people saying, again, it came out too quickly? Or do they pump the brakes and release content in a slower drip, and then people quit because there's not enough content? It is an incredibly hard balancing act, and I do not envy anybody's position inside those companies trying to figure that out. But I think what we can do is give them a little leeway. Again, the game has barely been out 2 months, not even quite 2 full months yet. And I think it's okay to step back and realize, hey, everything's going to be okay. It's not all that bad. Are there things that need to be fixed? Of course. Like I said, no game is without the warrant of receiving criticism where it is due. I think it is important to understand where you fall short, and I think Amazon and Smilegate does that very well, actually. They are very transparent with us, more so than they have been in the past, especially with Amazon Game Studio. I think we can all do a little better at giving them a little bit of slack. We have an age of instant gratification, and we expect changes almost immediately. But when you're making changes that affect hundreds of thousands of people, you cannot act in haste. You can't make a decision without thoroughly thinking it through yet. And like I mentioned, they are in an incredibly difficult position. I do not want that position, nor do I wish that upon anybody, because they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. I think one thing that would help everybody, not just in Lost Ark, but in general in the gaming community, is taking the time to realize what we do have. Taking the time to realize that we have a very fun game, that we have a game that was so popular in Korea, they wanted to bring it to the rest of the world because there was players from all over the world wanting to experience this game. We quickly forget how much time and effort these companies have put into these kind of games, and they are doing their absolute best to try to make them as fun as they can for everybody. And again, MMOs are not for everybody. Like I mentioned earlier, player numbers will drop, and that is to be expected because as an MMO's lifespan goes on, everybody has a different sense of engagement with the game, depending on how serious or not serious they are about it. With that being said, going forward, I really do feel like we need to cut them some slack. I really do feel that we can be better as a community and discuss the things that need to be discussed rationally instead of reacting with emotions. Now, this is not to say that whatever you're experiencing personally is wrong or invalid, or that you should feel some way specifically other than how you feel. All I've been trying to do is to try to open people's eyes to a different perspective. Try to be a voice of reason, if you will. It is totally fine to feel however you feel about the game. That is your prerogative, and it is not invalid. What I don't want to happen, though, is I don't want the community's perception of the game to be devalued based on the opinions of very large content creators or of people who have a lot of influence. I think people with a lot of influence have a personal responsibility to make sure that their opinion is thought out and is articulated well enough that players can understand why they feel that way, as opposed to just following the narrative that is being discussed. This is not to cast dispersion on any one streamer, YouTuber, content creator, etc. Their opinions are their own, and they are more than welcome to have those opinions and express them however they like. The thing that I'm trying to emphasize here is that it's important to formulate your own opinion, not just the opinion that you hear, or not just the opinion that you like the most. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, it's important to hear multiple sides to a story, to hear both sides, to understand the equation, and then with all that information, you can make the best decision for you and nobody else. So now that I've given you a general overview of the topic, I wanted to express how I'm feeling about things and where I am in Lost Ark currently. I'm currently 1379 on a Berserker, and I'm still very much enjoying the game. And I won't lie to you that the 1340 to 1370, or the dead zone, as it's called, was definitely a slog to get through. But it was incredibly satisfying to get through that slog, totally free to play, and reach to 1370 to be able to do the content there. Don't underestimate the value of setting yourself goals, even if they are something like getting to 1370 in a video game. It can still be rewarding and fulfilling. And that's what I wanted to emphasize, is that the games are supposed to be fun. Now, I realize getting to 1370 is rather daunting, but I promise you it is all the sweeter when you do get there. But it's important that I also reiterate that you should play the game at your own pace, that you should make sure that you are enjoying the game in whatever ways you enjoy the game, and that there is more to the game than purely your gear score. There are many forms of horizontal progression, whether it be engravings, or islands, or giant hearts, or your house, or whatever it may be, for you to work on outside of purely getting to the endgame content and raiding content. So to answer the burning question, is Lost Ark dying? No, I don't think so. In fact, I can't wait for new content to come out, and I hope that you can all get to the new content as well with me. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I greatly appreciate it. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe and do the YouTube stuff below and tell me where you are in Lost Ark and how you're feeling about it. Also, don't forget to click on the Twitch link down below. I do stream there. I hope I can see you guys there. And I hope everybody will be safe, be kind, and I'll see you in the next one.